Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? Well, I'm very happy to be here. I'm glad to see you. Yes, I know. I have been promising for the longest that we were going to be doing videos and Facebook Lives, and I have not been doing that. But I told myself starting the beginning of July, we are going to be doing either a Facebook Live or a video each week to answer questions about the podcast. And if you guys have any questions that you want to ask me, feel free to send me a DM. You can email me. I'll give you my email address. You can get in contact with me to ask me these questions that you have. If you would like to have coaching with me, you can do that too. But what I want to do today is talk about what we talked about a few weeks ago. Now, a few weeks ago on the podcast, Music and Therapy with Relationship Coach, that's me, Keana W. Mitchell, we talked about, are you in an unhealthy relationship or marriage? And I got a lot of questions, a lot of feedback from that. So what I want to do is just go through the top 3 questions to answer what to do. What are some things you can do, how to know how to deal with the unhealthy marriage, how to recognize the unhealthy marriage. So what we're going to do is go through some of these questions that I have. All right. So, and guys, listen, when you ask me these questions, I promise you, I will keep your name anonymous. We will not mention your name. I'll just read the question. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people may have the same questions. So what I'll do, I'll answer the question. And if you have a more personal question or something you need me to answer, you don't want me to answer in a live or in a video, then let me know. And I will definitely just meet with you or text you or whatever to answer your question. So that is not so everyone doesn't have to know. Okay. So if you have one of those questions, you can ask me that too. Okay. So we have 3 questions that I thought might be good because I'm pretty sure a lot of people have these questions. The first question is, how can you tell if you are in an unhealthy relationship? That is a good question. And the reason I say it's a good question is because so many times you don't know that you're in an unhealthy relationship. That's one of the reasons why people stay so long, right? Because you don't know that something's wrong. Now, there could be many reasons why you don't know something is wrong. Reason number one could be the relationships that were modeled for you. It was normal for people to check phones. It was normal for the screaming and hitting. All of these things could have been normal in that relationship. Cheating could have been normal, so a lot of toxic behavior, a lot of gaslighting, a lot of bad things, a lot of unhealthy things in relationships could have been normalized in the relationships that you saw. It could have been normalized in the relationships that were modeled for you. So that's why it's possible for you not to know that you're in a bad relationship. Um, Reason number 2 is because it happened gradually. It could have been a situation where you started off in an awesome relationship, a healthy relationship, but over time, things begin to deteriorate. And because it didn't happen suddenly, because it happened like slowly and over time and gradually, you wake up one day to find out, hey, I'm just not in a healthy relationship. I'm in a very unhealthy relationship. So those are just some of the reasons how you can tell that you're in it, well, why people stay in an unhealthy relationship, and just some of the reasons how unhealthy relationships happen. Now, in the podcast, we talked about ways that you could tell if you were in an unhealthy relationship. So some of the things that we talked about is lack of trust. That's a definite sign you're in an unhealthy relationship. Lack of intimacy, whether it's sexual intimacy or whether it is holding hands, whether it's connecting, lack of connection, lack of intimacy is a sign that you are in an unhealthy relationship. Blaming, that's a sign that you're in an unhealthy relationship because you're unable to take responsibility, or the other person is unable to take responsibility for their actions. So blame could be a sign that you're in an unhealthy relationship. Another sign, now this is a really good one, criticism can be a sign. Contempt for your spouse, that's another sign. So there are a lot of signs, and I can't go through all of them, but what you could do is I'm going to put the link to that episode of the podcast in the show notes, or not the show notes, in the comment section. I'm so used to saying show notes because that's what happened when we do podcasting, and that's where I put all my information. But no, I'm not going to put it in the show notes, but I'm definitely going to put the link to that podcast episode in the comment section so that you can go back and listen to it, because there are a lot of ways that you can tell if you are in an unhealthy relationship. Physical abuse is a sign. Emotional abuse, financial abuse, sexual abuse, all of these things, neglect. These are ways you can tell that you are in an unhealthy relationship. So that is how you can tell if you're in an unhealthy relationship if you are experiencing or dealing with these types of issues. Okay, question number 2. Should you leave an unhealthy marriage? Now, I love that question because we talk about unhealthy marriages, unhealthy relationships, and here's the thing. You have to make that decision. Now, I would say definitely you have to leave if there's any type of abuse, okay? If it's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, those are not good situations. If there's neglect, you definitely need to leave those types of situations because they deal with harming you physically and emotionally. So you would have to leave that type of situation. But some unhealthy marriages, you don't necessarily have to leave. Some unhealthy marriages, just knowing that they're unhealthy, can be a sign, okay, so I need to fix this. And it depends if the marriage is workable. Can it be fixed? Should it be fixed? Is there something that can make it better? Because just because a marriage is unhealthy doesn't mean that's the marriage that you should leave. It's almost like when you get sick, right? So if you are sick and you are unhealthy because you're sick, you end up in the hospital or whatever, that doesn't mean that people should forget about you or leave you, right? It just means that, okay, I'm sick right now for this moment. But when I take the medicine, when I go to the doctor, I can definitely get better. So we have to think of it like this. So just because you're in an unhealthy relationship or marriage now, you have to think about things like, was the marriage always unhealthy? Now, if it was unhealthy from the jump, from the start, and things have just gotten worse, it's not going to get better. Yeah, definitely. You may want to consider leaving. If any type of abuse is involved, you may want to start thinking about leaving. But if the marriage started off in a healthy spot, but over time became unhealthy, then that's a situation where you're like, okay, so if we go to counseling, if we get coaching, if we work on the marriage, can it get better? If you see that it could get better and that there's hope that things can get better if you work on it because it wasn't always unhealthy, then that might be a situation where you decide, okay, well, maybe I can stay. Maybe we could work on this. Things can get better. So it just depends on the workability of the marriage. And in this week's episode of the podcast, I do talk about whether you should decide if you should stay or if you should leave. So if you are thinking about what you should do if now that you are in an unhealthy marriage, then the podcast that's going to air tomorrow is one I would encourage you to definitely listen to because it talks about whether you should stay and whether you should leave. And I do talk about the workability of the marriage in more detail in that episode. So you may want to listen to that and it can help guide you and help you navigate through some of these issues. But definitely, I mean, there are times when, yeah, you definitely should leave, and then you can definitely stay. It just depends on what you want to do and if the marriage can definitely get better because you don't want to stay in an unhealthy marriage. Okay, let's just put that out there. Staying in an unhealthy marriage is good for no one. It's not good for you, not good for kids. So staying in an unhealthy marriage without a plan to make that marriage better or work on it is not a good option. So if you decide to stay, it's important to have some kind of plan. If you decide to leave that unhealthy marriage, then you definitely need to go. So whatever you decide to do, it just is based on you. And there is no right or wrong answer. Just what's best on you, what's good for your mental health, because you want to be healthy, right? So if you're in an unhealthy marriage and it's not getting better, it is messing with you emotionally. So if you want to be healthy, because you need to be healthy emotionally in every sense of the way, then it's important to make that decision whether I stay or whether I leave. But remember, it's never good to stay in an unhealthy marriage. You have to decide, if I stay, what are we going to do to make this better? So you don't stay in an unhealthy marriage. If you stay, work on making it better. If you decide to leave, then that's fine too. So the decision and the choice is really up to you. It just depends on a lot of variables. And I can't tell you specifically what to do because I don't know your specific situation. So because I don't know your specific situation, I can't tell you exactly what to do. What I can tell you what you should do is think about what's best for you, right? Think about what's best for you. Think about, is this going to get better? If it's not going to get better, what do I do? If it gets better, what do I do? There's just some things to think about. So that's how you can decide whether you're going to stay in the marriage and work on it or leave the marriage. Okay. Oh, number 3, question number 3. How can you fix an unhealthy marriage? Well, that is a deep question, and I don't know if I can get into it all now, but there are ways you can fix an unhealthy marriage. The first thing that I think is really important when you're talking about the health of a marriage is recognizing that your marriage is unhealthy. Like I said before, if you were to get sick, if you did not go to the doctor and recognize, oh, I'm sick, something's wrong, I don't feel well, then it would be difficult for your condition to improve. So just the fact that you recognize you are in an unhealthy marriage and you ask the question how to fix an unhealthy marriage says a lot about what you are thinking about doing and how you can make things better. So you've already accomplished something. You've already decided, okay, this marriage is unhealthy. You've already recognized that. So what do I need to do to make it better? So that is the first step toward fixing an unhealthy marriage, recognizing that your marriage is unhealthy. The next thing to do when you're thinking about fixing it or working on the marriage is get some help. The next thing you have to do is just make a decision of what you're going to do. So when you decide to fix something, I always encourage people to have a plan of action. So how are you going to fix it? Okay, so you can look at what's going on, listen to what your spouse is telling you, and begin to work on those issues. I would also encourage you to get either coaching or counseling so that you can talk to a therapist who can help you work through these issues. Now, the best case scenario is that you and your spouse work on fixing the marriage together, because in the end, it's going to take both of you to fix the marriage. However, as I stated in the podcast that you're going to hear tomorrow, if your spouse does not want to go to marriage counseling or does not want to get coaching, and they are not really interested in fixing the marriage at that time, it's okay. You can start the process of working on the marriage by yourself. So you don't have to wait for your spouse to agree to work on the marriage. You can just start. So you can go to therapy and you can see, what are my triggers? What are we doing? You know, my husband is saying this, my wife is saying this. How can I make this better? What can I do to improve the relationship? How can I be a better version of myself? Because that is the key. When you are a better version of yourself, you act different, you walk different, you think differently, you're more rational, you are more intentional. So just being a better version of yourself kind of fix half that problem, right? So maybe you're no longer snapping at your spouse, or maybe you're no longer arguing with them. So you are getting yourself emotionally healthy, and that is important to that's an important thing to do to fix an unhealthy marriage. So if you and your spouse are willing to work on it together, definitely I say talking, seek the help of counseling or coaching. That would be the way to go to begin to fix an unhealthy marriage. But if your spouse is not willing to work on it and doesn't recognize that the marriage is unhealthy, that's fine too, because even though it takes two people to work on a marriage, it takes one person to start that process. So you could be that agent of change to start that process. And I do talk a little bit more about this in the podcast episode that's coming out tomorrow about, should I stay in a marriage or should I leave my marriage? So this is also something that you may want to do. And once again, I don't know all the details. I don't know your specific situation. So I can't tell you specifically what might help or what you might be able to do. All right, so those are my questions. So guys, if you have any questions that you would like to ask me, like I said before, send me a DM. I'm going to put my email address in the show notes, not the show notes, in the comment section of this video, and you guys can get in contact with me. Okay, I'm also going to put last week's episode or the episode of the podcast that talks about an unhealthy marriage, and then you guys can listen to it again, because I did go into more detail. And right now I'm just answering questions. So if you want to hear more about that, then I suggest that you go listen to it again. Or if you haven't heard it, listen to it for the first time. And then tomorrow we do have another podcast episode coming out. It is called, Should I Stay in My Marriage or Should I Leave My Marriage? Because once you recognize that you are in an unhealthy marriage, then you have to make some decisions. Like, you got to decide, am I going to stay in this or am I going to leave? Because you can't just stay where you are without having a plan of action, because it's not healthy. That's why we call it an unhealthy marriage. Now, unhealthy marriages can become healthy, but you have to put in the work. You have to do things to make that happen. And if it doesn't happen, then definitely you should leave that relationship, because of the fact that life is too short. you're hurting yourself emotionally when you stay in these situations, and you deserve to be valued. You deserve to be loved and cared for. So that is why it's important now that you recognize, hey, I'm in an unhealthy marriage. Now we're going to talk about whether you should decide, or how you can decide whether you should stay in that marriage or leave that marriage. So we'll have that up tomorrow, and I will try to make sure we get it out. I know it's the 4th of July, but I will do my best to see that we get that video up and out to you guys tomorrow, so that if you have some time, you can listen to it, and you can listen to the podcast. And if you're in the process of making a decision and you have some quiet time, you can listen to it, and then you can know what steps to take to make that decision. Now, I know a decision to leave or stay in your marriage is not going to be easy. It's not going to be a decision you can make tomorrow, or maybe a week from now, or maybe a month. It's going to take some time. But when you make a decision and you begin to think about, what should I do to make my marriage either healthy or leave my unhealthy marriage, then you can begin making plans about what to do to make things better for yourself and put you, and if you have kids, your kids, in a healthy situation. All right, well, guys, like I said, if you want to get in contact with me, send me a DM. If not, I will talk to you guys next week. And my name is Keana W. Mitchell, and I am the host of the Music and Therapy podcast. And I am also a relationship coach. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And I will talk to you guys next week. And next week, we're going to be doing question and answers about the podcast that's coming out tomorrow. And it's about whether you should stay in your marriage or leave. We're going to do question and answers about that too. So if you have any questions about that episode and you want to send them to me, send me a DM, and I'll definitely talk about it on the show. If you have a question but don't want to talk about it on a video or a Facebook Live and you want it to be anonymous, let me know, and I'll just answer you directly. All right. All right. Well, I'll talk to you later. Enjoy your day. Bye bye.